guys, and welcome back. Today I kind of just want to dive right in and get real messy real fast, okay? Today we're going to talk about the F word. Feelings. I know, right? Are you scared? Because a year ago I was legitimately terrified to talk about my feelings. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that when you experience any sort of trauma, be it physical, emotional, psychological, anything that sends you into that downward mental spiral, the idea of talking about your feelings is something that makes you want to just kind of like crawl up in a blanket and hide and never speak to another human again. Feelings are very unpredictable, and as a society, we are not taught how to cope with them. And like, unless you're very, very lucky and had incredibly self-aware parents, which, let's face it, most of us didn't, especially those of us that come from a working class background, feelings are just a luxury that you don't have time for, right? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to worry about actually just staying alive. I can't worry about thinking about how I feel. Like, that's time spent that I could be, making money and bettering my life. And okay, look, stop right there, because I get that. I've been in that mental loop where you are just struggling to survive every single day. And the idea of dissecting your feelings feels like some sort of insurmountable task that is just not even remotely a priority. But today I want to take you through a concept that I've been tossing around in my head a lot. It's about taking emotional inventory of yourself as a person, as an individual. Not just what you think that you should be feeling, not what you're projecting to the world, but what you are actually truly feeling deep inside. So this is going to be a lot of self-honesty, and it's going to be really uncomfortable for probably a while, but I promise it's only going to get better from here. So, did any of you guys go to culinary school? Because I remember, we all kind of we get into culinary school, or we get into cooking in general because we like food, we like the connection that we've formed with food and flavors, and it excites us, You dissect a dish and you're like, oh my God, I could actually make this. This is so awesome. I'm going to go and I'm going to spend 4 days researching this and trying all the ingredients, and I'm going to get super familiar with how all of the ingredients play in their interaction with each other and why they're necessary and why you do it in certain orders. And come on, you guys know that's what goes on in your head when you get excited about a food project, right? Definitely happened for me, the strongest with fermentation. And it's rabbit hole engage. So that's what I want to kind of relate to ourselves, is that sort of excitement. So first week of culinary school, you go through these classes, and for us at CIA, one of the first classes we take was called Product Identification and Knowledge. And we go in there as young cooks thinking I know everything there is to know about food. This is awesome. This is a formality. I'm really excited to learn how to do certain things, learn new techniques, but you think you have a good grasp on ingredients. And then you get to product ID. And for us, there was just this giant table of herbs and vegetables and spices and things just laid out there. And then each one had a number. And first day we go in and we have a test. And it's write down what this is. So sounds really simple, right? Go to the grocery store. What's this? What's this? What's this? Yeah, so the whole class pretty much failed because you think you understand these things as a concept, and then when you're presented with them in front of you, you kind of freeze and you forget the difference between a butternut and an acorn squash. You forget the difference between parsley and cilantro, when you're first starting out and you're not super, super comfortable with all of these ideas as, ingredients into how they work in food. It's really overwhelming at first. But then you learn one by one, You taste parsley and you taste cilantro and you understand that there's a world of difference between them. And then you see how they're used in dishes and you come to appreciate each separately. And then by the end of the class, you can identify marjoram from oregano. And you understand that time is not just a concept of lateness, it's an herb that is delicious. And you understand that there are so many different versions of how anise can taste, whether it's fennel or tarragon or chervil, like they all have the underlying similarities, but they're profoundly different in the way that they interact in recipes and different food items, right? And the difference between a cooked onion and a fresh onion, night and day. But you have to understand how they taste in various forms before you can begin to utilize them properly in a recipe. And so what I want to talk about today is our recipe, like our personal recipe. And what we need to do is we need to relate to our emotions as herbs, as unfamiliar ingredients, as a chance to get to know what we're made of, and then ultimately improving our final product. So what do when you find an ingredient that you're not familiar with? Do you taste it? Right, you taste it, you name it, you look at it, you understand, like, what is this? What shape is it? Is it soft? Is it hard? Do I have to cut it? Can I use it whole? Can I tear it? There's all these questions that you ask about the ingredients that you use in your food. What I want you to start doing is asking those questions about the emotions that you feel in your body. And I know this sounds really simplistic, but I want it to, because it's really not, it's only hard the first couple times. And then you begin to understand how the emotions interact with each other and how they play into your overall dish and how you feel when you experience them. And really, feelings are just unfamiliar ingredients in our bodies, We need to explore them, and we need to understand how they work to make our dish better. So when we are not used to dealing with our emotions, we're essentially on emotional culinary school of day one, right? It's just a very unfamiliar ingredient. We have no idea what it is. We have no idea what it does to us. And so we panic, and we kind of take it, and we put it in a little box, seal it up, and we stick it in the walk-in, right? We stick it in the walk-in on a shelf we don't usually use, and it kind of starts to rot, and it rots. And then eventually we open that up and we're like, what the hell is growing in here? And then we throw it away and we pretend like it didn't exist. But you never actually throw it away, because it always comes back. And more often than not, the health inspector shows up on the day you're intending to throw it away. And what happens? You look like a slob. And you're embarrassed and you're shameful because somebody has seen that you neglected this ingredient in your walk-in. So let's be our own health inspectors, right? So the technique that I use most of the time when I experience any sort of feeling that I'm not familiar with, because that's all emotions are. They're just feelings we are not familiar with, that we have never experienced before. And it is totally fine to admit that you have never experienced an emotion before. In fact, it's healthy and it makes people trust you, because then you are being honest and real with them. And so when you experience a feeling that you've never felt before, the initial reaction is fear. The initial reaction is fear and anger. And we all have the tendency to kind of suppress it, and we're just like, I'll deal with it later, or I won't deal with it at all, or this isn't happening, and then we pretend like it's not happening, and then, that's how we develop PTSD, is we just pretend like things don't happen, and then little reminders keep coming up. It's like, oh, hey, remember that? And then you're like, no, I shoved that in a box in the corner. I don't want to ever see that again. That was terrible, right? Guys, it's time to clean out the walk-in. So when you feel a feeling that you're not familiar with, stop, okay? Stop, first of all. Secondly, identify where on the body you are feeling it. Treat this like you would treat an unfamiliar spice or an unfamiliar herb or an unfamiliar cut of meat that you've never had before. Treat it as something that you are curious about. Identify where it is on the body. Is it tingling? Is it a jolt? Is it a stab? Is it a tightness? Is it like an all-consuming, like suffocating feeling? Whatever it is, just identify it. Give it a name. And if you can't give it a name right away, that's totally fine. But just sit with it for a second and let yourself experience it. And I know this sounds really, really simple, but it takes a lot of focus and concentration and thinking about things in a completely different way. So with a sense of curiosity, ask yourself, where is this on my body? What am I feeling? When you've identified the physical sensations that you're feeling, ask yourself, why might I be feeling this? And this is going to be the surface level response, okay? As I have like 3 tiers of how I usually respond to my emotions and get to a point where I understand it. So tier 1 is, why am I feeling this emotion? Like, what is happening in my immediate surroundings to make me feel different or off? Is this an interaction that I'm having? Is it a person's is it the volume of their voice? Is it the intensity in which they're speaking to me? Is it the way that they're speaking? Is it the tone? Is that reminding me of something from my past? Is that making me feel something that I don't like feeling? Something that brings up bad memories? Is this a trigger? You know? So ask yourself, on a surface level, what in your immediate life is causing you to feel this way? Then take a second and ask yourself, when have I felt this feeling before? And here's where things start to really, really change. Because with this technique, which is kind of borrowed from a psychology technique called neuro-linguistic programming, it's aimed to find the root cause of your troubles. So, you know, a lot of times when I was going through this, when I was unpacking my own emotions, the results were really, really crazy. So they say that, the experts say that usually your first response is true. So don't censor yourself on this at all, you know, just first thing that comes to mind when you say, when have I experienced this emotion before? And usually that is somewhere under the age of 9 years old, because this stuff is instilled in us in childhood. And we don't realize it because our brains are not as developed as they are right now. And we are trying to just kind of get to the next level of brain development where we understand how everything plays its part into making us as sane or as crazy as we allow ourselves to be. So first, to recap, we locate the emotion on our body. Second, we understand what the actual physical sensation does to us. Third, we ask ourselves what in our surroundings is happening to make us feel this way. And then fourth, we ask ourselves when we have felt this in our past. What was the first time that we have experienced these emotions? And a lot of times, it's going to take you back to a memory that feels very insignificant, you know, a family dinner or something that happened in the 3rd grade or something that you remember, but you don't remember the significance of. And then challenge yourself to really sit with that memory, to try and recall that memory as vividly as you can possibly remember. And this visualization is usually very difficult for people with depression. You know, I know for me it was. Like, I feel like I didn't have my imagination for like 12 years. But when you start telling yourself that you have to do these things, that you are curious and that you want to do these things, it becomes a lot easier to open that part of your brain, that filing cabinet that you've locked away, that box that you've shoved in the back of the walk-in. You want to get to a point where you can walk into that walk-in confidently and say, oh, this is oregano. I first tasted oregano when I was 6 years old, and I got food poisoning from it, and from then on I associated oregano with being sick, and so I've never developed a reason to enjoy the flavor of oregano. But if you realize that it was just a fluke instance, you can start eating small bits of oregano and saying like, oh, I'm not sick. I'm fine, right? And then you can start being more confident in taking other herbs that you're not super familiar with and putting them into a dish because you understand the flavors and you understand how they play in your life. And when you do this, it usually for me ends in some sort of a cathartic release. When I'm realizing that I'm experiencing an emotion for the first time, it's a very powerful feeling, and I usually end up crying happy tears after I figure out what it is that I'm experiencing. I know, for instance, most recently, an example I think will resonate with you guys. So I was making dinner with my boyfriend, and he's not a chef, but he was in the zone. You know exactly what I mean. You're like totally in flow, like understanding how flavors work together, and doing the kitchen dance of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then you taste it and your eyes kind of roll back in your head and you just think, oh my God, that's it. That's the perfect flavor that I was going for. And I realized that in that moment, he understood exactly why I pursued cooking as a profession. Exactly why, because that feeling is what drives me on a daily basis with food. It's those moments of just complete surrender to flavor and taste and experience. And when you taste something and you physically feel the flavors, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe non-chefs are going to be a little bit like crazy right now, but if you cook professionally, or if you have a connection with food, you know what I'm talking about. You physically feel the flavors melding together in your body, and you understand that this is awesome. These flavors work, and you nailed it. And he was having one of those moments. And I started to feel a little bit panicky. And I was like, why am I panicking so much? Like, this is a really cute moment. Like, he understands me. And then I stopped. And I realized, holy shit, he understands me. He gets it. And then I realized that I was experiencing the feeling of being understood on a deep internal level for the first time at 32. Better late than never, right? So I stopped and I got really emotional, and luckily he's gotten a lot better at knowing that I cry for good things and not bad things now. But I told him this, and he just looked at me and he said, "Stick out your tongue." And I said, "What?" He's like, "What does it taste like?" And I said, "What?" It's like the feeling of understanding. And then he takes a little bit of this maple powder that he had made and he sprinkled it on my tongue. And I started to smile, and he's like, "Maple. It tastes like maple." So from now on, understanding will always taste like maple to me. And this is a really powerful thing because we can rewire our brains to have positive associations with unfamiliar emotions. And that in itself, every time I taste maple now, I'm going to feel the feeling of being understood. And that's awesome. Guys, this rules. Like, you don't even understand how cool it is when you get to a point where you taste something or you see something and it makes you so happy that it just completely overwhelms you. Because being overwhelmed is actually really awesome, because it just means that you're allowing yourself to experience life. And really, that's what I'm trying to help with. I'm trying to help with this sort of emotional inventory so that we can open up our palates, you know? We've opened up our mouth palates and, so we understand flavors, but now we have to understand our emotions, because we can't be the next amazing chef if we don't understand emotion, because food is based off of emotion. And if you want to be a better cook, be a better person. First of all, be a better person. And you have to cook. When people say cook with emotion, you have to know what the emotion feels like before you can make anybody else feel it, Like, you have to have a taste memory of tarragon before you ever can give it to someone randomly in a dish and know that they're going to enjoy it. It's the same principle. So this is my challenge for you. Next time you feel an emotion, unpack it. And it might be really weird, and it might be really, really uncomfortable. And there will be some times where you feel like it's not worth it. Like it's too much work. There are times when you know that the health inspector is 2 minutes away, so you're just going to take all the dirty dishes and you're going to shove them in a contractor bag, and you're going to tie it up, and you're going to put it right up next to the trash can, and you're going to wait until he leaves, until you unpack that and start to clean up. But we are all hyper organized at work, We mise en place our stations with an expert, almost obsessive level of perfection and attention to detail, yet we completely neglect everything that's up here. We gotta stop totally screwing ourselves over, because that's what we're doing. Right now we are poisoning our own stock. That's what we have to think of this as. We have to think of ourselves as our signature dish, okay? What's your signature dish? How long did it take you to perfect it? Do you have a signature dish, or do you just kind of wing it all the time? We have to decide what we want to be made of. But before we can decide that, we have to understand what we're currently dealing with. So if you're trying to make a hollandaise, but all you have is, a veal stock, you're never going to get the end result that you want. Plain and simple. It's not going to happen, and you're going to cause a lot of frustration and create a lot of dishes and irritate the fuck out of all your coworkers in the process while you're trying to do it, because it's just not chemically possible to get that product from this product, okay? Same concept with our feelings and emotions. If you want to be a good person, if you want to be happy, if you want to unfuck yourself, you can't pretend like you don't have any dirty dishes, You gotta start cleaning up. You have to start taking inventory of what you have and what you're made of, so that you can start improving your own recipe. We're all just made of a bunch of off flavors at certain times in our lives, but we have to identify that. If we have a stock going and we taste it and we're like, ooh, something's not off, we're not just going to dump salt in it, are we? If it's salty, what are we going to do? We're going to throw in a potato. If it's way too acidic, what are we going to do? We're going to add some sugar. We're going to add some fat. We're going to balance it. And just like in food, how do we balance our dishes? If something's off, we add salt, we add fat, we add acid, or we add heat. And so we have to apply this to ourselves. And so instead of salt, it's self-care, introspection. We have to understand ourselves. That is step one. This is one of those things that we just have to balance in our lives. So we've got self-care, introspection. Then we have finances. How are your finances doing? Take an honest look at it. Really, like a super honest look. And if it's not good, you gotta stop and come up with a plan to make it better, right? The next area of balance is exercise, activity levels. How often do you move? And I'm not just talking about walking to and from your car and work, you know? Are you taking care of your physical body? Because if you're not, that's going to throw all the other areas of your life out of balance because you physically can't handle what your life is demanding of you. And lastly, how's your home and family life? Do you see your partner? Do you have a partner? Are you dating? Do you find yourself in really chaotic and unpredictable and dramatic relationships after relationships? Or do you have like a pretty stable partner that you actually really truly care about? Do you see your friends? Or are your coworkers your only friends? Do you have a hobby? Do you have time for a hobby? And I'm not talking about watching Netflix. That is not even on our list of potential hobbies right now, okay? Once in a while is fine, but do you have a hobby? Do you have a social circle? Do you have a club or an activity that you belong to? If you don't, get one. I firmly believe that one of the things that has kept me the sanest throughout my life is my 25 years of fencing experience and the ability to just kind of go into an auditorium or a gym and put on a mask and stab someone. Awesome. You guys should totally try that. So salt, fat, acid, heat. Applying this to our personal lives, that's going to be self-care, finances, activity levels, and home and family life. So those are the 4 aspects of your life that you're going to need to balance if you start feeling a little off, okay? But my takeaway from all this is I really want to empower you guys to not be terrified of feeling, because when you feel, every aspect of your life will improve. Your food will improve, your relationships will improve, your finances will improve, your self-confidence will improve, your self-image will improve. You will probably lose weight after you go through this process enough. And then you're going to sit there 6 months from now as you realize your entire life has changed for the better, and you're going to wonder, like, what the hell was I waiting for? This is so easy now. But you have to start if you ever want to finish, right? And you have to see the value in it before you can ever truly want to do something in the first place. So again, I just want you to question yourself. Start to question yourself. If you've never done this before, it can be really weird and it kind of feels like you're talking to yourself, and that's good because you want to get to a point where you are talking to yourself, where you are confident that what you're saying matches what you're doing, matches what you're thinking. Because often these 3 things are wildly different. You know, what we show the world versus what we show those that are close to versus what we show ourselves. And we want to make all of these work in harmony together. And the first step is being curious. So open the walk-in, pick up an ingredient, and ask yourself, what is this? Why is it here? How does it taste? How do I cook this? Have I ever had this before? And how do I use this in conjunction with the other flavors that are already in my recipe? Heavy shit, I know. If you guys do this and you feel comfortable with it, I'd love to hear in the comments. It's pretty crazy what we hide in our brains, and unpacking it is kind of exhilarating when you think about it, because you get to do something truly for yourself. And I want you to be okay with that, because it's totally fine to care about yourself. I am encouraging you to give a shit about you and make yourself a priority and understand who you are, because I think we have this idea of who we are, and this is something I'm definitely going to go in depth with at a later date, but we have this idea of who we are, but a lot of times it's not who we actually are. It doesn't match what we feel inside. And so I'm challenging you to start the process of being authentic with yourself. Start asking yourself, why? Start asking yourself, what is this? Start asking yourself, do I want this? Start giving yourself the choice to improve and to educate yourself and accept yourself. Because that, my friends, that is the first step into a radical transformation. And I really hope that we can all share in this together, that we can all help each other. And one last thing before we go, when you have these realizations, write them down. Because you think, oh, I'm going to remember this. There's no way I can forget it. And then what happens? An hour later, you have no idea what you thought about, and the inspiration is gone. So take a piece of printer paper if you're at work. If you're stuck, like, get a little text-to-speech app and just say it really, really quickly, just so you remember it, and then write it down later. Because when you write it down, it becomes real. When it becomes real, it becomes something you can solve rather than something you need to distract yourself from. Thanks, guys. See you next time.